I thought it would be important to include a video on how to celebrate the biblical feasts. I'm not going to go into details about what the Bible says about each of the biblical feasts listed in Leviticus 23, because we have a free ebook or printed book, if you prefer, that you can get to help you study it out and say, what does the Bible say? In this session, I really want to talk about how to make it practical and how to make it part of your homeschooling, okay? I want it to be something that doesn't stress you out. So as I look at it, there are really 4 different ways that you could be celebrating each of the biblical feasts. Now, I want to mention something about the biblical feasts. If we were all in Israel, living in the land under King Yeshua, we would be going up to Jerusalem 3 times a year, at least with this caveat. The men would be going up to Jerusalem 3 times a year. Why the men? Because they're going to bring the family's offerings that they've been setting aside and laying aside, a tenth of everything that the Father has blessed them with, and they're going to bring it up to Jerusalem 3 times a year. Now, it never says that the women and the children are required to go. I would like to go. I know I wouldn't want to miss it, but let's be practical about it. If we just had a baby, we probably wouldn't be able to go. Or maybe my mother, who is elderly, is quite sick and she can't travel. I would want to stay with her and take care of her. And so my husband would go without me. So as I think about how it would be in an ideal situation, almost ideal, not quite the eternal kingdom where no one's sick or anything like that's happening, but you know, in the coming 1,000-year reign, when there may still be sicknesses and problems on earth, maybe not everything is absolutely perfect, then I would still have to have some of those feast times at home, and maybe I'd have little children with me, or maybe some of my teenagers would stay. So I've been thinking about it, and I'm thinking of the 4 ways to celebrate. Number 1 would be at home with just my family. And here in the United States, where we can't always save up enough money to be able to travel with a whole family over to Israel 3 times a year, literally our family has never ever been able to do that. So at home is a logical place for us to celebrate the feast. And for our family, we celebrated the feast for quite a few years just as a family. And so we have quite a few memories of that time, and it was very special. And in a little bit, I'm going to go over some ideas. Number 2, we could celebrate it with others in our local congregation. And maybe in our local congregation here in Michigan, we have a local congregation, and for quite a few years, all we did was just gather together. We gathered together on the first day and on the last day, because it says to have a holy convocation. Technically, again, that's supposed to be in Israel. But if we don't live in the land and things are not ideal because we're in dispersion, then it's wonderful to be able to get together with other believing families who celebrate the Bible's feast like we do, and to be able to gather together with them and sing and pray and worship and play games and have meals together. And so there's a lot of fun ways you can do that. Thirdly, maybe your local congregation is traveling to a place and you're all going to stay there together. Or maybe you don't have a local congregation and you join with a congregation and celebrate with them. Like our congregation, we are opening up our Sukkot feast to others this year here in Michigan. So if you don't have a place, you could come and celebrate Sukkot with us this fall. And so a lot of people do this maybe in the spring for the spring feast, but more often in the fall. They'll all travel. Sometimes people stay in tents or RVs. Some people stay in cabins. Here in Michigan, we tend to stay in a cabin because it's cold in the fall. So we aren't really able to camp outside too much. But whatever, it's going to take a totally different set of planning to be able to travel than it would be if you were just staying home. And the 4th and final way is the ideal way, and that is to travel to Israel. And it is possible to do that. And it is possible to do it on a budget, or if you have the finances to be able to do it not on a budget and really, rejoice in everything that the Father has blessed you with. So those are legitimately the 4 ways. Now, first of all, before you plan one of those 4 ways for any of the feasts, whether it be Passover in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or whether it be Shavuot in the summer, or whether it be the fall feast, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, or Sukkot, I want you to remember, do Bible things in Bible ways. Just because there's a tradition doesn't mean you have to do it. And it certainly doesn't mean you are not celebrating the feast as good as someone else because you didn't follow every single tradition that they followed. Sometimes it's really easy to become a little bit jealous or to covet when you see other families, how they're celebrating, and you see it maybe posted on social media, or you hear about someone telling about their feast at Sabbath, and you think to yourself, I can't do it like that. Be content and rejoice in the way that the Father has allowed you to celebrate, and concentrate on doing Bible things in Bible ways. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's easy. You get out your Bible and you find all the places in the Bible where it mentions that feast. You look it up and you write down the specific commands. And if it's not listed as a command in the Bible, you don't need to worry about it. You could do it. It's fun. It's fun to have traditions. But if it's not listed there, you certainly shouldn't be upset if you can't do it. And you should not look down on other people for not doing it exactly like how you do it. Do Bible things in Bible ways. Definitely obey the Father. If He says to rest on a certain day and not work your job, then you need to do that. You need to trust Him and don't work your job that day. But if it doesn't say you can't work your job on that day, like say it's one of the middle days of the feast and you're really not able to get away for an entire week, you can't afford it, you've got bills to pay, don't feel guilty, okay? Do it Bible things in Bible ways and know that someday He's going to restore all things, bring us back to His land, and it'll be different. But for today, just do Bible things in Bible ways and take the pressure off, okay? Don't feel that you have to do more than what is required by God Himself. Secondly, schedule your homeschooling calendar around the biblical feasts. Now, in an earlier session, I talked about my planning method I use with a Together School planner, and how we take a calendar and we plan out when we're going to do school and when we're going to take breaks. And I would really recommend that you take at least the days that are required for Sukkot in the fall and unleavened bread in the spring, and you take off those 7 or 8 days and you don't do school. That's my recommendation. I think you should make those days really special, and that you know that means you're not having to do math and phonics and algebra and all of those things, but you're concentrating on learning about the Father and His feasts, and you're having fun as a family. If you are in a situation where you have to do school and you need to report those days, then there are creative ways that you can learn math and phonics and copywork and so on as you study the feast. And so that's a possibility, but if you could all do it, don't have regular school. Plan those 180 days or whatever you need for your state somewhere else in the school year so that you can really concentrate on celebrating. Now, if you're going to travel, or even plan special events that might require a little extra cooking or cleaning or decorating. It's really fun to decorate. Not required, not a command. Well, a little bit required for Sukkot, but not, I was meaning like over the top decorating. So if you're going to need to do some of those things, you might consider taking off a little more than what the feasts require. So as an example, in the fall, we have on the first day of the 7th month, we have Yom Teruah. And one of the things I like about Yom Teruah is we blow the trumpets, the shofars, and we make noise and yell. And it's to remind us that, hey, the feasts are coming. The feasts are coming. Now, we might still do school at our house for a few more days after that, not the day of, because the Bible says don't work that day. So we don't do school. But, the next day, we might do school. But our brains are immediately switching. They're like, oh, it's almost the feast. It's almost the feast. And I can see the concentration on science and math are going out the window. So sometimes, I like to take those days, and we don't necessarily do normal school. It's a great time to schedule things like field trips. Those count for school days, right? Everybody says so. You can write them down in your Together School planner so that you know you did a field trip that day. It counts towards 180 days. Another good thing to do would be maybe some special big projects, science projects, writing assignments that you have been putting off. Otherwise, start cooking. Start doing some extra cleaning. Start getting decorating done for the feast if you do decorating. Start packing your suitcases and planning out what you're going to buy. Take an extra special trip to the store. All of those things are things that you can plan. And I think realistically, you need to schedule that. When you get to Yom Kippur, which is on the 10th day of the 7th month, by all means, you need to start putting the schoolwork away. And you need to rest, as the commandment says on that day. Do not work. But then on day 11, as soon as Yom Kippur is over, oh man, the preparations for Sukkot are definitely on the way. And it's the same in the spring. In the spring, on the 10th day of the first month, that would be when the lambs were chosen, at least in the Exodus account. And so we like to put a stuffed lamb on the table that day to remember that. And the preparations are on for Passover, the special food that we're cooking, what are we going to do all of the special days. And it's hard to concentrate on school. Sometimes I do make my kids do a little bit more school in the spring. If you're traveling though, again, start packing. So if you're doing some extra special house cleaning, which is not technically required, you're only required to get the yeast out of your house. But if you wanted to do some extra special house cleaning at that kind of time, and you need to do it sometime so it works, if it works for you, that's a good time to take a few days off of school. Now, another time to consider taking days off of school is after the feast. Because I don't know about you, but when we come home from a week of camping in the fall, it's going to take us a couple days to put it all away and to figure out where our toothbrushes are and just kind of decompress. In fact, I was going to share with you something that we've been doing in our house. I have a couple people in our house that have to stick to a pretty good rhythm for their hormones to work properly. And so one of our children has a genetic disorder that's really especially important for her. And we have found over the years that we've been keeping the biblical feasts that it's kind of nice to have two different schedules. I guess I don't like the word schedule here, maybe two different routines. We call it routine A and routine B. Routine A is our normal everyday stuff that we do in a homeschooling year. But routine B is what we do when we have a day that's off schedule and the feasts are off schedule. So here's some examples. We might still keep breakfast and lunch and supper at approximately the same times on both routine A and routine B. For little ones, I might make sure, always on routine A that they have a nap, but on routine B, we might not have time for a nap because we're out doing things. So maybe you just mark that down and you just make sure that you at least keep going on the things that are important for hormones and schedules and stuff like that, like meals. Meals are super important, and making sure that we have a bedtime, but maybe sleep in an extra hour or two in the morning and call it okay. So that's kind of nice. I like doing that. So let me go back to those 4 kinds of ways of celebrating the feast real quick. And let's talk about at home. At home, I think, is where it's most important to decorate. Something about decorating and counting down the days to feast, like, of course, we're going to count down to Shavuot in the summer. We're going to count a whole 50 days. But it's fun to count down all the time, and it's fun to decorate. And something about decorating that really helps you get in the mood and get that excitement. Secondly, I recommend that you make special meals that you only make at that time of the year. And it comes to feel like when you eat that. Like we have a twice baked potato casserole that we've made several years, quite a few years now, for Passover. And the reason is sometimes Passover falls right near Sabbath, and it's really hard to get ready for Sabbath and Passover. So this is something I can make 2 or 3 days ahead of time, stick it in the refrigerator, and then the day of Passover I can pop it in the oven and it's easy. I never knew that now when I taste that, I taste Passover. It just tastes like Passover to me. And it's just a silly thing, I guess, but it just goes to show you that how many memories are in our taste buds. I mean, there are certain apple cider. Apple cider tastes like Sukkot to me. I love apple cider at Sukkot time. Hot chocolate with mini kosher marshmallows is another Sukkot feeling thing, as are s'mores. S'mores, we tend to have s'mores on around Sukkot all the time. We like to have certain traditions at Yom Teruah every year, and now it wouldn't feel like Yom Teruah if we didn't do those traditions. So get in the habit of maybe writing down some of the things that you ate and some of the traditions that you're having, so that you'll remember year after year, and your kids will come to expect it and love it, and it'll help you as a mom prepare. You'll even have like similar grocery lists and things year after year. Now, if you're celebrating with others, some really fun things to do. I would build a sukkah in the backyard. A sukkah is just a temporary shelter, and depending on the weather where you live, your kids might be able to sleep out in it, or you too. Is it required to sleep in a temporary shelter? Not unless you're a native-born Israelite, according to Leviticus 23. but it's still fun. I mean, it's one time that is, as much as possible, if you are able to sleep in a temporary shelter, even in your backyard, it's pretty awesome to do so. Now, sometimes up here in the north, where it's really cold, but we might stay out as late as possible and then come in. Or on the nights that it's not raining, we might sleep outside. Another really fun thing to do with your sukkah in the fall, and I keep concentrating on Sukkot at the moment, it keeps coming to my mind, probably because Sukkot is coming, but it's really fun to invite friends over to your sukkah, and they don't even have to be Torah keepers. They could be relatives or neighbors that live near you, and it's a way of hospitality to invite people to your sukkah, and while they're there, you can tell them a little bit about why you're celebrating. You don't have to get all preachy on them, but it's kind of fun to let them see, you know, this is not that bad, not that weird, kind of fun. I love it if there are several families in your congregation that are all doing Sukkot together, is to have like a progressive dinner and go from sukkah to sukkah, and have, maybe you could have the appetizer at the first one and the main dish at this one and a dessert at this one, and that's such a fun thing to do. Other ideas are, if it's one year we had Sukkot in Minnesota and it was way too cold for progressive dinner, but we went from sukkah to sukkah, and each one had a little snack, and we had like we were wrapped up in our winter coats. It was cold. Minnesota's cold, and we were freezing, but we would have, like, at one we had crackers with a little dip on top, and another one they just had candy, and another one they just had pickles, and it just really fun. And we just went from sukkah to sukkah. And another thing that is fun to do if you're going from sukkah to sukkah is to sing, and everyone has a song that they sing, and and as people come to your sukkah, you sing the song, and then they leave and another group comes in and you sing the song, and it's just, those are some fun things to do that really make it special. And it's also fun to see how other people decorate their sukkahs. One year we didn't have to do it the traditional Jewish way. We didn't have the resources or ability to do it, and we just put up a tent, and we still decorated our tent with all kinds of tree leaves, our tree limbs and leaves, and it was just really pretty. We hung some white little lights all around, and I'm telling you, we have so many good memories from doing that. Now, if you're traveling to a faraway place, I think you're going to concentrate more on what your packing list is going to be, and you Google things like camping ideas and meals that you can take and pack. And I think that is probably the more challenging way to do Sukkot here in the United States, because you're going to have to pack a lot of things, and you might not have access to laundry. You might not have a refrigerator, so you're going to have to pack a cooler. You might have to think about how you're going to cook meals. I mean, I like to take my Instapot if I have any access to electricity whatsoever. An Instapot is a fantastic thing to take on Sukkot trips. So is a slow cooker. You could take an electric skillet that you can just get on Amazon and take it just for the feast, and you can, by the time you have those three things, you can cook so many things, especially if you don't have time to make an actual fire and cook over the fire. You're going to want to think about, for little ones, how you're going to change their diapers. Make sure you bring warm socks and warm clothes, so that if they get wet, you have a change of clothes and things like that. So just general camping things. But in that situation, as a homeschool mom, I definitely take off an extended amount of time from school, because it's just too stressful to try to pack everything in at that time of the year. You want to stop your normal life and concentrate on the feast. If you're going to Israel, I've never been to Israel, so I myself am not going to be able to speak firsthand, but I do know there are groups that meet in Independence Park in Jerusalem, for instance, or you might be able to get a bed and breakfast from a family that loves to open their home at Sukkot or at the Passover, or even at Shavuot. Shavuot, from what I hear, is an excellent time to visit Israel. It's not as expensive as the fall and spring feasts. It's not quite as well traveled, so you might be able to get there a little bit less expensively. So that's something to consider if you want to travel to Israel for the first time. And I would reach out ahead of time. Go on places like the Torah Network and reach out to people and make friends, and so you don't feel completely alone. If you can find another family to meet and rendezvous with once you get to Israel, you're going to probably feel a little bit better than going cold. You might consider taking a tour with someone like A Rude Awakening, with Keith Johnson, or one of those places. I really do recommend don't go it alone the first time. Get advice about how to do it. And I think all of us in the Torah movement should be getting our passports so that we are ready to go. Now that's going to bring me down to a question I get a lot is, how do you pay for everything? This is starting to sound expensive. I think the Bible is clear on this. Remember I said do Bible things in Bible ways? We live in a time where we are heavily taxed. And we come out of churches that tell us to tithe, and they aren't even Torah keepers. But as we come out from those things, and as we think about the burdens we're under, I still want to encourage you to set aside 1/10 of your income. And here are some of the things that the Bible says that 1/10 should go for. It says that it should go to those who are teaching you in the Word. Your local elders should be receiving a portion of that 1/10. It should go to the poor and the widows and the orphans. And I think we all recognize that, but a lot of people don't recognize that it's also supposed to be set aside for celebrating the feast, so that you have a hunk of change, just like you used to celebrate that winter holiday by having maybe even a special savings account with your bank. You could certainly open up a Christmas savings account with your bank and yet use it for the feast. That would be a perfectly fine thing to do. Or have a jar that's set on the bookshelf and everyone knows that the money that's put in there is for the feast, and the excitement will definitely grow as you see a few green dollar bills and maybe a 20 in there, and the kids are putting their change. And of course you need to have a jar for the poor, and I think again you should be giving to those who teach you in the Word. But it's important to save up for the feast. And if every week you will get in the habit, when your husband gets his paycheck or you get this income or that income, you need to set aside 1/10 and make sure it's going to those things that the Bible talks about. But it's okay to save up money for the feast, so you have the money to have a really awesome steak dinner at Shavuot, or to buy that cheesecake that is so expensive you'd never buy it at any other time, or some baklava from the local deli. It costs a lot of money to do that all the time. To be able to maybe get your kids some special presents, something that's special to help them remember the feast. Maybe buying some stickers for Sukkot, or some t-shirts so that the whole family has a t-shirt. Just things to make it very special. Decorations, things to build a sukkah if you're home. And if you're going to travel to Israel, set aside some of that money to get yourselves passports so that you're ready to go out the door. Those are all perfectly great things. Don't forget to give gifts to the poor. And that's part of the reason that you're setting aside money. Granted, I want you to help the poor other times of the year, but at the feast, look for somebody who doesn't have the money to celebrate the feast quite as well as you do, and give them a gift. It's very biblical. Lastly, what do you do with family that watches your celebration of God's biblical holidays in Leviticus 23, and they wonder if your kids are missing out because maybe they aren't doing Halloween or Christmas or Easter? I hope that you will take lots of pictures, and post them on social media, and show your friends and family how amazing God's feasts are. And count up, how many days do we have holidays listed in the Bible compared to the big 3 that we had in Christianity? We are such blessed people. So when we speak with those that know us, whether they're friends, family, neighbors, people at the store, constantly be thanking the Father for what He's done, and say, oh my goodness, we're having so much fun. I love to go to hair appointments. My teenage daughters like to get their hair trimmed nice before some of the feasts. So that's a great time to go. It just makes us feel really special when we get to the feast time if our hair is done nice. And sometimes my husband will let me get a manicure. It's a special thing. But the salon people will ask us, so anything special going on? And we're like, yes. We're getting ready to go on a camping trip with our church, and it's called Sukkot. It's a Hebrew word, and it means living in tents, and we're going to be living in cabins because it's cold. And they're like, oh yeah, it's been really cold and rainy lately, and yeah, but we're going to have a dance one night, and we're going to have a movie under the stars, and we're going to have a baptism in the lake. And they're like, a baptism in the lake in Michigan? And you're like, yeah, it's awesome, because these people are making commitments, and I'm really proud of the goals they're setting, and you can say it in a way that they'll understand, but most of all, communicate how amazing our Father is, the gifts He's given us to give us these feasts. They're so wonderful. And with your children, it makes all the other holidays just not so missed. You just don't need to talk about them. Yeah, the decorating is in the stores, you're going to see it, but just ignore it. It's not important. It's not a part of your life. continually bring the conversation back to the Father and everything He has given us. It's so much better. And your kids, after a while, will not even know what they missed. It's going to be awesome. And the memories that you're going to make with your family, but most of all, they're grounded on the Word. And it helps us to walk out our life, to have those annual, 3 times a year really, reminders of everything that Yeshua has done for us and what is coming prophetically for us. And it's just those tangible reminders. Everything should point to Him and should point to the future. And when we do that, I think our kids, just their faith becomes so much more real to them than it ever did with those other holidays. It's just pretty awesome.